Why has this country become such a ridiculous joke of a nation? A place where wrongdoers don't get punished, where the guilty are set free, where illegal migrants are handed money shortly before being driven to bars and nightclubs in our towns and cities, where anti-British marches are permitted to take place every weekend in our capital, and where our elected representatives seem incapable of doing anything other than looking after themselves. It's time to take stock, ladies and gentlemen, because we now know there is definitely going to be an election in 2024. In less than 12 months, we will have a new government. My common sense tells me it won't be much different from the one we've got now. If anything, it might be worse. But the truth is, we have all lost faith in our leaders, both local and national. We've lost faith in our country because it's been so badly stewarded for so many years. So tonight, I want you to tell me what we're going to do. I've got a few ideas which I'll share with you over the next 2 hours. But let's wake up, let's smell the coffee or the tea, whichever you prefer, and let's find some answers. Because this is the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. It was a combative end to the parliamentary year for the Prime Minister as Rishi Sunak was grilled by senior MPs over his Rwanda migration plan and when he will succeed in stopping the boats.
There isn't a firm date on this because I've always been clear from the beginning.
You said you're going to stop the boat, so I just want to know
and
what
we will keep going until we do.
Okay.
But this is not one of these things where there's a precise date.
You don't have a date?
This is something where before I took this job, they had only ever gone up.
Okay.
And now they're down by a third.
Yeah, so they're up, they're down, they're up, down, I don't know. Let's introduce the panel. Henry Hill from Conservative Home is here tonight. Writer and broadcaster Emma Woolf, welcome. And Deputy Political Editor at The Sun, Ryan Sabey. Great to see you all. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd prefer to call you a cast of characters rather than a panel. Panel sounds a bit boring. So I guess we should kick off with the Peter Bone story, which broke literally just a few minutes ago before we started. Ryan, let me kick off with you. I mean, another by-election for Rishi Sunak? I mean, is this going to be the Parliament? I know I always ask you these questions to put you on the spot. Is this the Parliament that's had more by-elections than any other Parliament? It must be.
They're pretty much up there. I think there was a survey done or some analysis done just the other day that 1 in 20 MPs had been either suspended or they'd lost the whip. So It seems like if someone wants to call it the Parliament of rogues, it seems to be that one. But this is kind of the headache, the nightmare that Rishi Sunak didn't want going into the new year. He's got to Christmas, thought he'd done the liaison committee, got through that and put his feet up tonight. But now he's got this recall petition. And again, you look at that Wellingborough seat, big majority of about 18,000 or so. You look what the recent by-elections they'd lost, Selby, Mid-Bedfordshire. It just adds to that growing problem for Rishi Sunak.
And he's promising, isn't he, that we have an election, Emma, this year, well, 2024, I should say. Said it last night in Downing Street. So, I mean, why is Britain in such a bad state, I suppose, is a big question. That's the answers I'm looking for tonight.
So you want the answer to broken Britain, how do we fix it?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have
You've got 2 hours.
No, I really do think
I'm not wrong,
we're in a terrible state. And I know it's easy to say, it didn't used to be like this. But did it really used to be this bad and this broken and everybody on strike and trains not working and, hospitals facing yet another catastrophic winter? It feels like, and also everybody's morale just feels like everybody feels. I think the cost of living crisis has gone on and on. We're back in winter again. Parliament is doing absolutely nothing. I mean, if this by-election is early, I don't know how early in the new year it will be, but I mean, if this comes around at the same time as he's defeated, facing more Rwanda problems, it could be a really bad start to 2024 for Sunak.
Well, Rwanda's certainly not going to be the answer, is it, Henry, in terms of whether it's going to work or not? I mean, they were pressing him today on when is it happening, and he's going, well, of course, I can't say. And they go, well, yeah, but you said you were going to get people onto planes. Have you got any deals with any plane companies? No. I mean, he's never going to win this one, is he?
It's just a farce.
It's ridiculous.
No, Randa is absolutely not going to be what decides the general election. He has to talk about it effectively because he's realised he can't run on anything other than immigration. But he can't run on immigration, legal immigration, because it's tripled since the Tories came in 2010.
With his help?
Yeah, in 2010 it was 257,000 net immigration. That was a record. Last year it was 745,000. So he can't talk about that. So he has to talk about Rwanda. But even if the Rwanda scheme worked, and you got a few hundred, maybe even a couple of thousand people to Rwanda, that is a tiny fraction of the number of people that we're actually having come over. So I suspect what will actually happen is if he gets the Rwanda bill through in some kind of viable form, he'll probably go for an election in May before we have the summer and people realise it doesn't work.
Realise that none of it works, because he's also snookered himself in a way, because he can't any longer blame lefty lawyers and courts and the ECHR because he supposedly ruled all that out. He's basically said, we can get around all that.
But what he can blame, and who he probably will blame, is the House of Lords.
Yeah.
Because I suspect what will actually happen is the House of Lords will amend this thing to death. He will refuse to accept those amendments because they will ruin the bill.
Right.
And then he'll lose the bill in March. It's called double insistence. The House of Lords will block it. And then he'll be able to spend the whole year going, if only the Lords hadn't blocked it, everything would have been fine.
It is mad, isn't it?
How stupid does he really think the British public is? It's like Michael Gove popping up this morning and saying, oh, I'm going to build I'm going to allow, I'm going to not allow, but I'm going to take away the restrictions for 300,000 new homes to be built.
Yeah, I mean,
we're not idiots. We know electioneering when we see it.
Right.
If this Randa thing, if a plane ever took off any runway, how much would it have cost? Everybody knows it would have cost hundreds of thousands per person to get rid of these few migrants over to Rwanda.
Yeah,
it's just
it is.
None of it makes sense.
The thing about the despair that you speak of, I mean, I was around in the 70s, which I doubt any of you were. And, you know, when there was kind of, you know, national strikes and there was bins not being emptied and there was rubbish piling up in Leicester Square and people couldn't get buried, there was nothing like the despair there is now because people felt like it was a sort of Blitz Spirit and they thought, well, we'll just have to get on with it. You know, I sat at home with my parents in candlelight, you know, for most of the night. We had 1 hour of electricity to have dinner. I mean, it was ludicrous. For like 3 months, we lived like that. The coal miners were on strike, the power stations were on strike, but we all kind of went, yeah, we're going to get through it. But whereas now it's kind of like nothing works.
Because there was a kind of pride in the country.
There was.
Now I don't think there is.
But now you go from, you know, people who travel by train who can't get a train on time, can't get to where they want to go, get in a car and there's traffic jams everywhere, try and get a doctor's appointment, can't get one. And we're going to have people on saying they're pulling their own teeth out. You're kind of going, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I think when it comes to Rwanda as well, why is he putting so much political energy into this one policy?
Which isn't going to work.
What else we all know. He can't talk about legal immigration. He can't talk about wages. He can't talk about economic growth, even discounting any of that. So he can't talk about the NHS. He can't talk about public services. He can't talk about trains. Like, what do you talk about if you're trying to put together a Conservative election campaign? Like, you've got your pensioners, right? You've looked after them. You've bent the entire economy around looking after them. They're fine. But everyone under the age of 55, there was a poll out from YouGov today. Tories have always used to be like home ownership, right? Home ownership made people Tory.
Yes.
They are 4 points ahead with people who've paid off their mortgages. Right. And they are 20 points behind with people who have mortgages. Right. That's how little, how
small. And the rest of the country can't even get on the housing ladder.
Renters, they're like 35.
Anybody.
But the Conservatives have destroyed the social base of the party, and they don't have a good economic story to tell a winning coalition.
And the traditional kind of Tory, you know, go-to issues like law and order is completely knackered. You know, there is no justice system that works. You know, there's documentary after documentary about even police who actually manage to arrest people complain that they can't ever get them to court. And if they do get them to court, they never get sentenced. If they do happen to go to jail, they're let out before they should be.
And every single one of us has a story of we've been burgled, we've been harassed, we've been this, we've reported it, we've got a number, we've got a crime reference number, and nothing has ever been done. Everybody knows it.
When they've only been in for 13 years, there's only one party to blame.
Yeah,
and that's why you get people like.
I mean, you can't really blame it all on Nick Clegg or the Labour Party. You said, well, when we inherited it when there was no money. I mean, you know, they've been trying that for a while.
But on justice, and there's one through line you had to pull. There were many, but one through line for what's wrong with this country is that we don't build anything.
Right.
The reason all of the sentencing nonsense happens is prisons. Yeah. We don't have enough prison places. No. When the government announced, they announced earlier this year that they were going to raise the amount of time you had to wait before you could be eligible for early release from half your sentence to 2/3 your sentence. All that meant was that the prisons crisis got worse, right? Because they didn't create a single extra prison place. Yeah. I've spoken to people in government who say we need about 20,000 extra places. Yeah. But whenever you try and build a prison, the local Tory MP will be like, not here, not in my constituency. That's the issue.
Yeah, nobody wants a prison. But they're quite happy to say they're going to build houses. But why are they not saying...
But they're not going to build those houses.
But why are they not saying they're going to build prisons? I mean, because if you're not going to build houses, you say you are. You're not going to do anything about migration, but you say you are. Why can't they just start saying we're going to build more prisons, even though they're not going to?
Well, they probably were. They probably were in 2010. But like, it's 2023. No one will believe.
Are they just knackered then? Is that where we are?
I think you were talking about what William Hague said the other day.
William Hague said, look, they may never get back into power. You lose it this time.
That's the Conservative
and you just wonder whether, Rishi Sunak, is he that Prime Minister who, instead of losing by 120 seats, you lose by 65, so they're in the game next time. Right. So you just wonder...
Is that what he's playing for, do you think?
That could be a tactic. He's looked at the opinion polls, a consistent 20-point poll deficit, means something. I mean, some of that may be soft.
Yeah.
you know, it's only going one direction.
I mean, Henry, you'll know these figures probably. I mean, there is a possibility that Keir Starmer doesn't get a majority. He wins a minority government, right?
I mean, in theory, in reality, the polling deficit is absolutely. It's hard to say how bad it is, and also the Tories are behind on every issue. In 1997, that defining defeat for the Conservatives, they were ahead on defence, they were ahead on immigration. They're not ahead on either of those points. I think the bigger problem for Keir Starmer is that he doesn't have an answer either, right? The Tories have rolled £30 billion worth of unfunded spending cuts since the 25-6 fiscal year, right? So he comes in, year one, taxes are already very high. He has to find 30 billion of cuts or tax rises. He doesn't have any answers apart from maybe building some houses, which he might do. And then we still haven't fixed it, and we've kicked out the government. That's the real problem that we face. In 3 or 4 years' time, we might be here going, well, we threw them out, and nothing changed.
But Henry, where are those Conservative voters going to go? Where are the people that cannot, even holding their noses, cannot vote Labour? Are they going to go on? Yeah, they're going to stay at home. I think it's going to be massively low.
When you live and breathe this stuff, it's like, you're like, where am I? Do I vote Reform or whatever? But there are loads of people who just won't vote, especially if you go long and it's November next year, it's cold and dark, and you don't like the government, you don't like Labour. You just don't. Loads of people just won't vote.
But is that also the problem?
It's a horrible position to be in, not voting when you believe in voting and you really have nowhere to put that vote.
But also, is it the fact that people have just given up, as I said at the top of the show, with the leaders of this country, with the leadership of this country, and they don't think there's anything worth voting for? Because there isn't.
But why should we vote if there isn't? If we don't feel inspired or motivated or even believe any of them?
In defence of our leaders a little bit, they are responding to like what voters want. Like the problem we have, you compared it to the 70s. In the 70s, I think, I obviously wasn't there, you had a problem in that Britain wasn't working, but an awful lot of the reasons it wasn't working were like quite popular. There was that post-war consensus. We have the same thing, right? Like people do not want us to build houses. They don't want us to build railways. They don't want us to build reservoirs or prisons. They don't, you know, there's no real incentive to, you know, we want to bring down net immigration, right? But we don't want to pay for people to have children, and we need someone to pay for all of those pensions. But if you poll the British public, they'll be like, well, people shouldn't have kids they can't afford. Well, fine, OK, then you have to import people to pay those taxes. So,
does anybody really believe that those people we're importing are paying any taxes at all, which are worth a fag end?
I mean,
they're not, are they?
A lot of them are. The dependents they're bringing in are.
Yeah, but the net sort of result is that we're paying them more than they're paying us.
But we need working age. We need working age people. We need enough working age people to pay for the NHS, social care, and pensions. And the fact is, the previous generation did not have enough kids to do that. There are not enough working age people. There are even fewer kids now because we've priced childcare as a luxury good, and housing is incredibly expensive. Like all of these things are the result of policy decisions.
Well, the bloody country's full. Popular. It's full of people. And loads of people are not working. That's the other problem. There's millions of people who are not working, who could be working, and if they were working, they would provide a lot more money for the exchequer. But we'll have to come back to this. This is good. So we're getting some answers. We are finding our way through the maze of problems. We will get there.